Carnotaurus was a predator unlike any other. Fast, lightweight, and adorned with two blunt horns. It moved across the Cretaceous floodplains of South America with quiet precision. Not massive like Tyrannosaurus, not aquatic like Spinosaurus, but something else entirely. A runner, a striker, a specialist in motion and form. This documentary is a quiet unfolding of what science tells us about Carnotaurus. From its birth and growth to its hunting methods and fossil legacy, we will trace its story using only the measured light of evidence. If you enjoy learning in peace, or find rest in ancient rhythms, consider subscribing. And if there's another dinosaur you'd like to explore, feel free to suggest it in the comments below. Now, we begin where all lives begin, with the first moments of emergence from the egg. In the Late Cretaceous, around 70 million years ago, the region we now know as Argentina was not the grassland it is today. It was a warmer, wetter place, filled with river systems, ferns, and the slow stirrings of strange life. In the margins of these wetlands, the first Carnotaurus eggs would have been laid. We have not yet uncovered a definitive Carnotaurus nest, but closely related abelisaurids offer clues. Many theropods likely nested in shallow, open bowls, scraped into the ground. Minimal structures that relied more on location than design. Sheltered spots near water with loose sand or silt would have made ideal nesting grounds. The ground there would stay warm and soft, helping to incubate the clutch. A clutch may have held 10 or more eggs, each about the size of a melon. Oval, thick-shelled, and arranged loosely together. The female, perhaps, would remain nearby during laying. But whether she stayed after is still debated. Some theories suggest she may have guarded the nest until hatching. Others propose a quicker departure, leaving the young to fend for themselves, as many reptiles do today. When the eggs began to hatch, the noise would have been soft. Scratching, tapping, and the slow fracture of shell. One by one, the hatchlings would emerge, wet, blinking, and fragile, yet already bearing the features of their lineage. A short face, small ridges, where horns would later grow. Hind limbs, stronger than their forelimbs, even from the first day. Each newborn Carnotaurus likely measured less than half a meter long, but the potential for growth was immense. Inside their bones, growth rings suggest a rapid pace of development once the young began feeding. These early days were critical. Mortality was likely high. Predators such as crocodile forms, snakes, or even larger abelisaurids may have preyed upon hatchlings who strayed too far. Still, survival favored speed. Even as juveniles, Carnotaurus would have had relatively long legs and light builds. These features suggest that from the very start, they relied not on strength, but on swift escape. Their tails were already stiffening with muscular development. Their forelimbs, even at this stage, were small and tucked, offering no defense but wasting no weight either. It's possible they traveled in small sibling groups for a short while, moving together for safety. But as with many theropods, direct evidence for post-hatching behavior is lacking. What we do know is that the environment around them was dynamic. Rivers rose and fell, vegetation shifted. The land that birthed them demanded constant awareness. Over time, those who survived the vulnerable juvenile stage began the slow transition into independence. As they grew, their features became more defined. The horns above their eyes thickened, their legs lengthened further. In the tail, the counterbalance to their rapid stride became increasingly muscular. The early life of Carnotaurus, like much in paleontology, is glimpsed through the lens of comparison. Not direct memory, but fossil fragments, relatives, and the behavior of ancient kin. And through this lens, we see a beginning shaped not by spectacle, but by small adaptations. Quiet speed, efficient form, and the silence of soft steps beneath tall ferns. Now that we've learned how Carnotaurus may have begun its life in the warm Cretaceous wetlands, let us now talk about how it grew, not just in size, but into a specialized and swift hunter. Carnotaurus did not stay small for long. From hatchling to adult, its growth was rapid, guided by a skeletal structure that favored speed, efficiency, and power concentrated in unusual places. While many theropods followed a pattern of steady growth into heavily muscled apex predators, Carnotaurus evolved in a different direction. Its limbs became lighter, its torso narrower, and its center of mass more finely balanced. Every detail of its frame suggests a hunter adapted for bursts of movement across open ground. As juveniles, Carnotaurus would have stood roughly waist-high to an adult human. Its skull was already shaped with the beginnings of the bony ridges that would later support the thick, forward-facing horns that define its silhouette. The face remained short and deep, with a broad upper jaw and compressed nasal structure. These features gave the head a compact, almost bulldog-like appearance. As the individual matured, the horns became more prominent, fused directly to the frontal bones of the skull. What these horns were used for remains uncertain. The absence of clear wear patterns or combat injuries suggests they may not have been used primarily for fighting. Instead, their development over time supports a possible role in display or recognition. Males and females may have had subtle differences in horn shape, which could have served as visual cues during social interaction. The bones supporting these horns were dense, and in adults, they would have made the head appear even more robust than it functionally was. Carnotaurus had one of the most extreme limb reductions in any known theropod. As it grew, its arms became not only shorter but also less functional. Each forelimb ended in 4 small fingers, 2 of which were barely developed and likely useless. The bones of the arms were heavily reduced, and they lacked the musculature for rotation or grasping. Unlike the small but functional arms of Tyrannosaurus, Carnotaurus had arms that were, for all practical purposes, vestigial. The function of these tiny forelimbs is still debated. Some researchers propose that they had no role at all in hunting or movement and were simply evolutionary leftovers. Others suggest they may have served a secondary purpose, such as aiding in mating rituals or balance during a fall. However, the most widely accepted view is that the arms were simply non-functional, a cost Carnotaurus could afford because of its extreme reliance on hind limb locomotion. Its legs told a very different story. Carnotaurus was built to move. The bones of the pelvis and hind limbs were unusually long and narrow with high muscle attachment points. Its femurs were proportionately longer than in most theropods of similar size, and its tibia and metatarsals suggested a high stride frequency. The toes were narrow and strong, ending in claws that were more for traction than for slashing. Fossil trackways from related species in South America suggest that Carnotaurus could run with considerable speed, possibly faster than many other large predators of its time. Much of this speed was made possible by the tail. Unlike many theropods that relied on long, flexible tails for balance and turning, Carnotaurus had a tail that was stiff, muscular, and narrow. The caudal vertebrae were connected by tall neural spines and interlocking processes that limited lateral movement. This rigidity allowed for strong, repeated contractions of the tail muscles, which acted as an anchor for the legs. Essentially, the tail worked as a stabilizing counterweight, helping the dinosaur push off the ground with each stride. The growth of this tail structure began early in the dinosaur's development. Juvenile specimens show signs of increasing tail muscle mass long before full body size was reached. This suggests that running was not just an adult trait but a survival mechanism built into Carnotaurus from a young age. As the dinosaur matured, these features became more exaggerated, turning it into one of the most specialized bipedal runners in the theropod lineage. The vertebral column also adapted to support this kind of movement. The dorsal vertebrae were tightly spaced, supporting a rigid and slightly arched back. This helped to distribute the forces generated during running and may have helped reduce energy expenditure during long-distance movement. Combined with a narrow chest and reduced arm mass, Carnotaurus had a body that minimized drag and maximized efficiency in open terrain. Its head, in contrast, was heavy, but the short neck and strong cervical vertebrae helped support the skull while keeping it balanced over the body's center of mass. The head did not sway loosely when Carnotaurus moved. It was held firmly aligned with the body and allowed for quick, targeted movements when striking at prey. This head stabilization would have been especially useful during high-speed chases, when precision was just as important as power. One of the most important aspects of Carnotaurus growth was the way its entire skeleton seemed. Optimized for terrestrial hunting, it was not a generalist. It did not adapt for climbing, swimming, or slashing. Instead, every year of its development brought greater emphasis on a specific kind of locomotion. It sacrificed strength in its arms to gain more from its legs. It limited its tail's flexibility to enhance its propulsion. It accepted a narrower skull in exchange for lighter weight and a faster bite. The fossil record supports this view of specialization. No known abelisaurid shows the same degree of adaptation for cursorial movement. In fact, Carnotaurus may have been among the fastest of the large-bodied theropods. Not because it had the strongest muscles or the longest legs, but because its entire skeleton was refined for motion across dry, open ground. The ecosystems of South America were changing during the time of Carnotaurus. Forests gave way to more open floodplains and semi-arid environments. This shift favored dinosaurs that could cover ground quickly and efficiently. Carnotaurus did not need to climb or swim. It needed to move, to pursue, to flee, to cross the plains in silence. Its life, from youth to adulthood, was marked by that need. It grew into a creature of momentum, one that turned bone and muscle into quiet velocity. Now that we have explored how Carnotaurus grew and survived in a world that favored speed over strength, let us now talk about how it fed. Its diet, skull design, and hunting strategy reveal even more about this remarkable predator. The skull of Carnotaurus was short, deep, and heavily built. Unlike the long-snouted profiles of many predatory dinosaurs, Carnotaurus had a compact face with a robust upper jaw and high narrow skull bones. These features contributed to a bite that was fast, focused, and possibly specialized for quick strikes rather than sustained force. When viewed from the side, the skull of Carnotaurus appears almost triangular, with the back of the head rising high above the jawline. This shape was supported by deep muscle attachment sites at the back of the skull and along the neck vertebrae. These attachments suggest that Carnotaurus was capable of rapid head movements, which would have been useful for seizing prey or tearing flesh. The snout was narrow from above, giving Carnotaurus a more tapered profile when viewed head-on. This tapering may have allowed it to fit its jaws between ribs or into narrow spaces when feeding. The nasal bones were fused and strengthened, and the horns above its eyes likely added structural support, though their role in feeding was likely minimal. Instead, the horns seem to have served more in display or combat, while the rest of the skull evolved around a more functional purpose: hunting. The teeth of Carnotaurus were small, curved, and relatively simple compared to those of other large theropods. Each tooth was thin and blade-like, with fine serrations along the edges. This tooth structure suggests a slicing function rather than one adapted for crushing. The bite itself may not have been as powerful as that of Tyrannosaurus, but it was likely much faster. Quick, repeated bites could have inflicted deep wounds in soft tissue, allowing Carnotaurus to weaken its prey over time or finish off smaller targets in a single strike. Evidence from jaw mechanics studies indicates that Carnotaurus had a low bite force relative to its size. However, it compensated with strong neck muscles and a stiffened lower jaw. These features would have helped in delivering fast, repeated bites, instead of holding onto prey and wrestling it to the ground. Carnotaurus may have used a more efficient method: bite, release, and retreat. This kind of hunting would have worked well in open environments. In the floodplains and savannas of late Cretaceous South America, large herbivorous dinosaurs roamed in herds, including titanosaur sauropods and various ornithopods. Carnotaurus may have targeted juveniles or weakened individuals. Its speed allowed it to approach quickly, strike with precision, and withdraw before larger herd members could retaliate. Some paleontologists suggest that Carnotaurus may have scavenged as well. The lack of strong grasping arms would have made active subduing of prey more difficult, so it may have relied partly on finding carcasses or striking injured animals. However, its adaptations for speed and rapid biting suggest that active hunting was still a major part of its lifestyle. Skeletal design does not match that of a dedicated scavenger. Its environment would have offered many opportunities for ambush. The stiff tail and balanced body posture also contributed to its feeding strategy. Carnotaurus could run with minimal upper body movement, keeping its head stable even at high speed. This would have allowed for a cleaner approach when closing in on prey. Unlike heavier predators that relied on brute force, Carnotaurus used timing and precision. It likely hunted alone, striking quickly and vanishing just as fast. There is no direct fossil evidence of stomach contents or feeding marks attributed to Carnotaurus, but comparisons with related abelisaurids and modern predator-prey dynamics help build a plausible picture. Carnotaurus did not need to overpower large prey. Instead, it needed to be faster than its target and more accurate with its bite. Its small but sharp teeth could slice through skin and muscle, creating wounds that weakened its prey over time. It did not need to kill with the first bite. only to slow its target enough to strike again. Its jaw could open wide, but not to the extent of dislocating or engulfing large prey whole. Instead, the movement was controlled and efficient. The lower jaw was deep and rigid, providing stability during feeding. The tongue, bone, and interior mouth structure show limited flexibility, suggesting that Carnotaurus did not manipulate food within the mouth but likely swallowed chunks whole after tearing them loose. The skull's internal air spaces, or sinuses, also played a role in reducing weight. These air pockets lightened the head without compromising strength, which is important for a predator that depended on speed and head movement. The more agile the head, the more effective the strike. Another unusual feature was the skin of Carnotaurus. Fossil impressions show a mosaic of non-overlapping scales, some of which were raised into low ridges or knobs. These skin textures were preserved along the ribs, flanks, and tail. Although they do not directly influence feeding, they support the view that Carnotaurus was a visual predator. Its appearance may have helped it blend into dry environments or signal dominance to rivals. A streamlined, textured body could have helped during close chases, reducing drag and possibly assisting in thermoregulation during periods of exertion. It is likely that Carnotaurus relied heavily on vision while hunting. The position of its eyes suggests limited binocular vision, but the skull width and shape allowed for a decent forward-facing view. Its sense of smell, while present, was probably not as well developed as in some other theropods. It did not need to track scent across long distances. It needed only to see its prey, judge distance, and move fast. Its hearing may also have played a minor role. Some reconstructions of the inner ears suggest sensitivity to low-frequency sounds, perhaps useful in detecting movement through the underbrush or listening for herd activity. This would have enhanced its awareness during ambush or pursuit. Overall, Carnotaurus was not a brute force predator. It was a precise one. Every part of its feeding behavior was optimized for quick strikes in open terrain. Its bite was not the strongest, but it was fast. Its skull was not the largest, but it was compact and efficient. Its arms were not useful for capture, but its legs and tail allowed it to strike before the prey could react. This feeding method shaped everything about its movement and posture. It did not need to grapple or overpower. It needed only to outpace and outmaneuver. A predator that relied on timing and form over size and force. Now that we have explored how Carnotaurus fed and hunted across the plains of South America, let us now examine how it may have behaved socially. From the purpose of its horns to the question of whether it lived alone or in groups. Its mating and social life remain among the most intriguing parts of its story. The life of Carnotaurus was not only shaped by survival and speed. At some point, every individual reached maturity and encountered the challenge of reproduction. Although direct fossil evidence of Carnotaurus mating behavior has not yet been discovered, clues from closely related abelisaurids and modern analogs allow for quiet speculation rooted in science. The most visually distinctive feature of Carnotaurus was its paired horns. Thick, blunt structures above each eye, these horns fused directly to the frontal bones of the skull and became more prominent with age. Their presence in all known specimens suggests that they were a permanent feature, not limited to one sex or age group. However, the degree of prominence may have varied slightly, and this subtle variation could have served as a visual signal during courtship. In many modern species, horn-like structures are used for display. Among reptiles and birds which share ancestry with theropods, head crests, ridges, or horns often signal maturity, dominance, or readiness to mate. It is possible that Carnotaurus used its horns in a similar way. Two individuals may have displayed their horns through posturing or parallel walking, a slow, deliberate movement, quiet challenge, a visual statement of health, strength, and genetic fitness. There is also the possibility that these horns were used in direct physical contests. But if such combat occurred, it was likely limited to pushing or shoving rather than violent clashes. The horns of Carnotaurus were not sharp or pointed. They were thick, with rounded tips, and supported by dense bone beneath. This construction would have absorbed force rather than delivering it. The head and neck were reinforced to withstand impact from the front, suggesting that short, controlled head movements may have been part of its interaction repertoire. These behaviors may have been ritualized. Two Carnotaurus individuals, possibly male, may have approached one another slowly, holding their heads level. Turning slightly to display their side profiles, they may have circled. They may have bumped heads. But the goal may not have been to injure, may have been to assess, to signal, to resolve without escalation. Little is known about vocalization in abelisaurids. Carnotaurus had a relatively simple inner ear structure compared to other theropods. Its ability to perceive sound likely focused on low frequencies. This suggests that deep calls or ground-transmitted vibrations may have been used to communicate during courtship. A low, sustained call across the plains. A subtle tremor in the ground. The body of Carnotaurus, preserved in rare skin impressions, also offers clues. Its skin was textured with rows of small raised scales and occasional larger knobs. These features may have contributed to visual communication, catching the light during movement. A swaying tail, a rhythmic step. These displays may have been more important than vocalization. In open habitats with few obstacles, vision was reliable. Movement, silhouette, and posture could all carry meaning. Whether Carnotaurus lived in groups or alone remains uncertain. Most evidence suggests that it was a solitary hunter. No bone beds have been found containing multiple individuals, and its highly specialized body design points toward a lifestyle that did not require cooperation. However, temporary aggregations during the breeding season are still possible. Many modern solitary predators come together briefly to find mates, and then separate once reproduction has occurred. If Carnotaurus did form temporary pairs, the process may have been brief. A display, a challenge, a decision, then mating and departure. Parental care, as seen in some modern birds and reptiles, is unlikely. The highly reduced forelimbs and bipedal posture of Carnotaurus would have made nest building or defense difficult. It may have laid eggs in a secure elevated area and then moved on. Fossils from other theropods suggest that open nests in sandy soils were common, sometimes near riverbanks or in soft, warm floodplains. Each clutch may have held up to a dozen eggs, spaced slightly apart in a shallow depression. The size of the eggs would have varied depending on the age and health of the mother. Once laid, the eggs likely incubated from external warmth. Carnotaurus, like many reptiles, may have relied on environmental heat rather than brooding. There is no evidence of brooding behavior. Unlike birds, Carnotaurus lacked the structures necessary for sitting on a nest. The body was too heavy, the chest too narrow, the arms too reduced. Instead, if any defense was offered, it would have been from a short distance away. Perhaps through observation or physical presence to ward off smaller predators. The timing of mating likely followed seasonal patterns. In the late Cretaceous, South America experienced wet and dry seasons. The beginning of the wet season would have brought renewed plant growth and an abundance of herbivorous prey. This would have made it an ideal time for Carnotaurus to lay eggs, ensuring that hatchlings would emerge when food was most plentiful. Over millions of years, these patterns would have repeated. Maturity, display, mating, nesting, separation, and from each generation, only a few would survive to continue the line. Fossils of Carnotaurus have so far come from a single, remarkably well-preserved individual found in the La Colonia Formation. No direct fossil evidence of juveniles, nests, or multiple individuals has been uncovered. This limits our understanding of its social behavior, but it also preserves its mystery. It allows us to study each detail with care, to let the silence around the fossil speak. Carnotaurus, in all its strangeness, left a quiet legacy. It did not roar. It did not form herds. But in the soft scrape of horn against horn, in the still posture of a display under the Cretaceous sun, it may have found ways to communicate. Subtle, visual, calm. Now that we have explored the social life and mating behavior of Carnotaurus, let us now turn to its disappearance. Carnotaurus lived near the end of the Cretaceous period, around 70 to 72 million years ago. It occupied the vast floodplains and semi-arid regions of what is now South America, part of a unique and isolated ecosystem shaped by continental drift. In these final chapters of the Mesozoic, the world was changing. Environments were shifting, sea levels rising and falling, and new species were evolving. Yet Carnotaurus thrived. But even for such a specialized and well-adapted predator, time eventually ran out. The extinction of Carnotaurus is part of the broader story of the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, a geological moment that marks the end of nearly all non-avian dinosaurs. This extinction event, which occurred approximately 66 million years ago, ended roughly 75% of all life on Earth. Though Carnotaurus may have disappeared slightly before this global catastrophe, it still lived under the shadow of an unstable world. The most widely accepted cause of this mass extinction is the impact of a massive asteroid near what is now the peninsula in Mexico. The force of this event released vast amounts of energy, triggering wildfires, blocking sunlight, and disrupting climate systems across the globe. In the weeks and months that followed, ecosystems collapsed, plants withered, food chains broke, temperatures dropped. For large land animals like Carnotaurus, survival became impossible. There is no direct fossil evidence showing Carnotaurus at the moment of extinction, but as part of the abelisaurid lineage, it belonged to a group that disappeared entirely from the fossil record by the end of the Cretaceous. Their absence in post-impact rock layers tells the story in silence. No more footprints, no more bone, only gaps where presence once was. Its extinction was not dramatic. There was no final battle, no last stand. Like many species, Carnotaurus likely faded from the land slowly as conditions changed. Its prey became scarcer. Nesting sites failed. The sky grew darker. Temperatures shifted. One by one, populations disappeared. Still, Carnotaurus left a mark. Its fossilized skeleton, discovered in 1984 in Patagonia, remains one of the most complete and informative abelisaurid specimens ever found. This lone individual, preserved with remarkable detail, has shaped how paleontologists understand the broader group. The impressions of its skin, the clarity of its horns, and the nearly intact skull have offered insights into both its biology and its evolutionary role. Today, Carnotaurus is recognized as a symbol of South American dinosaur diversity. While the northern continents were dominated by tyrannosaurs and ceratopsians, the southern landmasses fostered unique lineages. Carnotaurus belonged to this distinct narrative. It was a predator shaped not by the needs of the north, but by the challenges of Gondwana. Its legacy also extends into science, communication, and public imagination. Carnotaurus appears in museum displays, documentaries, and reconstructions not for its size, but for its strangeness. Its deep skull, short arms, and horned head make it instantly recognizable. But behind this visual identity lies a story of adaptation. A life built around speed, precision, and silence. In evolutionary terms, Carnotaurus represents the last great experiment of the abelisaurid lineage. It refined their traits to extremes. Where earlier species had bulkier builds or more generalized forms, Carnotaurus pushed toward minimalism. It was lighter, faster, and more refined in its anatomy. It was the result of countless generations of selection, sculpted by climate, terrain, and prey, and then it was gone. Yet from its absence, knowledge has grown. Each fossil, each reconstruction, and each quiet hour spent studying its bones adds to a picture that was once lost. The legacy of Carnotaurus is not only in what it was, but in what it continues to teach. About extinction, about survival, about the power of form and function shaped over time. Now that we have looked at the legacy left by Carnotaurus and the circumstances that ended its time on Earth, let us now turn to the discovery itself. In the final segment, we explore how the bones were found, studied, and shared. From silent stone to scientific revelation. The story of Carnotaurus, though ancient in origin, began its return to light in the early 1980s. In the arid landscapes of Patagonia, southern Argentina, a discovery was made that would become one of the most important in South American paleontology. Embedded in the red sedimentary rock of the La Colonia Formation, a near-complete skeleton of a large theropod was uncovered. It was preserved with unusual clarity. Bones lay in articulation. Skin impressions surrounded the flanks, and above the skull a pair of thick horns gave this discovery its name. Carnotaurus sastre was officially described in 1985 by Argentine paleontologist Bonaparte. The name means meat-eating bull, drawn from its dietary habits and horned skull. The species name, sastre, honors Ungel Saster, the landowner on whose property the fossil was found. This single specimen remains the only known skeleton of Carnotaurus, but its condition is extraordinary. The fossil included most of the skull, vertebrae, pelvis, legs, and parts of the tail. Though the arms were incomplete, their extreme reduction was still evident. Just a fragment of bone told the story of a limb more reduced than in almost any other large theropod. Most striking, however, was the preservation of the skin. Covering large areas of the fossil were impressions of non-overlapping polygonal scales. These ranged in size, with larger conical bumps spaced at intervals along the flanks and tail. The texture and arrangement suggested a tough, visually distinctive surface. It was the first time such detailed skin had been found on a large predatory dinosaur. For the first time, scientists could study not just the shape of the bones, but the texture of the living creature. The skull also drew immediate interest. Its shape was short and deep, with fused nasal bones and a broad, high snout. The horns above the eyes were made of solid bone and connected directly to the frontal bones of the skull. Inside, the brain case showed simplified structures, suggesting a brain adapted for quick processing of movement and limited depth perception. After careful excavation, the skeleton was prepared and placed in the collection of the Museo Argentino de Ciencias Naturales in Buenos Aires. There, it has remained a focus of study and exhibition. Casts and reconstructions now exist in museums around the world. Digital models, CT scans, and biomechanical analyses have extended its legacy further, allowing paleontologists to simulate its posture, gait, and muscle structure in detail. The discovery of Carnotaurus reshaped the understanding of abelisaurids. Before its unearthing, this group was poorly known. Most abelisaurid fossils were fragmentary or lacked diagnostic features. Carnotaurus provided a reference point. It became the model against which others could be compared. As more discoveries followed in South America, Madagascar, and India, the diversity of abelisaurids became clearer. Carnotaurus stood at the apex of this lineage. Its influence also reached the broader public. The striking appearance of Carnotaurus, with its horns, textured skin, and unusual proportions, made it a compelling figure in books, documentaries, and digital media. Though its behavior is still being understood, its image is instantly recognizable. Over time, researchers have continued to refine their understanding of Carnotaurus. Biomechanical studies have examined its speed. Some suggest it was among the fastest large theropods, with long, powerful legs and a stiffened tail that acted as a counterbalance. Others have focused on its feeding mechanics, investigating the motion of its jaw and neck. Still others study its skin, comparing it to modern reptiles to understand its function in thermoregulation or display. The environment of the La Colonia Formation, where Carnotaurus was found, has also become a focus of research. Fossils of freshwater turtles, fish, and other dinosaurs have helped reconstruct the ancient landscape. It was likely a semi-arid floodplain with occasional wetlands, hosting a wide range of species. This setting provides context for the life and behavior of Carnotaurus and supports theories about its hunting and nesting preferences. To date, no second specimen of Carnotaurus has been confirmed. Its singularity makes it valuable, but also limits certain interpretations. Without multiple individuals, it is difficult to assess variation in size, age, or sexual characteristics. Still, the richness of the existing specimen offers much. Even in isolation, it continues to inform. Ongoing exploration in Patagonia holds promise. Each dig carries the chance of uncovering another Carnotaurus, or a close relative, that might reveal new details. Until then, the known skeleton remains a quiet monument. A record not only of a species, but of an ecosystem, of a continent's unique evolutionary path. The legacy of Carnotaurus is built in stone. It's not loud or exaggerated, just precise. Its discovery helped fill a gap in the story of late Cretaceous predators. Its anatomy clarified the role of abelisaurids. Its skin showed how much detail the fossil record can preserve, and its continued study reminds us how much can still be learned from even a single skeleton. Here the documentary concludes. The movement, the feeding, the brief social encounters, and the quiet extinction of Carnotaurus all now return to rest, laid gently back in the sands of thought. Thank you for staying with this journey through the life of one of Earth's strangest theropods. If you would like to continue learning about prehistoric life, consider subscribing. Let us know which dinosaur you'd like to explore next. There are many more bones to uncover, many more stories still buried in stone.